Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have two terrific poets with us today, Aruni Wijesinghe and Robert Krut. Aruni will read first, and then Robert. Aruni Wijesinghe is a project manager, ESL teacher, erstwhile belly dancer instructor, and occasional sous chef, a grateful pushcart prize and best of the net nominee. She has been published nationally and internationally, both online and in print journals and anthologies. Her debut poetry collection, that's the number 2, Revere Place, Moontide Press, is a love letter to her family and miraculous childhood in New York. Her latest collection, The Litany of Missing, Arroyo Seco Press, is a meditation on loss, longing, and love. Here's a superb poet, Aruni Wijesinghe.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your warm welcome, and thank you for having me. Before I start, I want to say that both Holly and I were included in the Beat Not Beat anthology, and at one of the readings, we were asked to read one of our own poems and a poem by another poet in the anthology, and I read Holly's poem. So perhaps this was all predestined. So my first collection with New Moontide Press, my first solo collection is To Revere Place. And I'm just going to read a couple of poems from this and then on to some more recent work. In keeping up with the times or looking back on the times with the wild success of the Barbie movie, I'm going to read a Barbie poem. Barbie Coloring Book, or How I Learned What is Beautiful. Today I show Mary Alice Maneri my new Barbie wristwatch. She compliments the beauty of the sky-colored band, asks me the time so I can practice. She finds a coloring book with a portrait of Barbie looking just like she does on the face of my watch. Mary Alice is good at coloring. She is older, maybe in junior high already, but she still makes time for me. Mary Alice stays inside the lines. She knows how to glide crayons gently. She chooses pink for Barbie's lips, the color of Jackson and Perkins rosebuds from Ummy's garden. She uses an orange crayon with a light touch for Barbie's creamy skin. I hand her yellow for Barbie's blonde flip hairstyle, light blue for her wide headband. When Barbie is complete, Mary Alice tears the page from the book, prints both of our names across the bottom. 3 names, Mary Alice, Aruni, and Barbie. I carry the page carefully back to my house, affix it to the refrigerator. I look at Barbie every day. I carry her face on my small wrist where she counts down the hours until I am big. But my hair stays black and straight, and I have to use a brown crayon never quite the right shade. I am always outside the lines. My pictures never Barbie perfect. So I'm sure I share a love for Judy Blume like many people do. And once a friend and I challenged each other to write Judy Blume poems, so this was my offering. If Judy Blume was my aunt, her name would be my middle name instead of a Sanskrit word for a flower that doesn't grow in New York City. At family parties, I would sit with her while she'd sneak Virginia Slims. We'd skip the rice and curry, steal away to McDonald's for burgers and Cokes. I'd finally have the life I checked out of the school library, the simplicity of meatloaf dinners and Sean Cassidy records. She'd give me a soft focus adolescence and the reassurance that I would eventually bud, my body flowering on its own mysterious schedule. She'd gift me a diary, tell me to start with lists of boys' names, streets, colors. Andrew Mallon, the 2 Aldo Leones, Revere Place, Howard Avenue, Lester Drive, Dogwood Pink. These lists would become my answers. And for my last poem from this collection, I was thrilled to be nominated for a Pushcart Prize by Cultural Daily for this poem. Goldie Unlocks, after Ron Kirchie, whose poetry I adore. She rattled the doorknob, then let herself in. She called it taking shelter. She didn't think of it as breaking and entering. She sampled all 3 bowls of porridge, dipping her spoon repeatedly. She complained about the first 2. She wolfed down the 3rd. She didn't think of it as petty theft. She sat in all 3 chairs, fidgeting. She dented the cushions, scuffed the legs. She broke the 3rd. She didn't think of it as destruction of property. She climbed the steps to the bedroom, each stair creaking. She rumpled the sheets, left smudges with her dirty shoes. She slept in the smallest bed, undisturbed by conscience. She screamed when she saw bears, didn't try to defend her actions. She brushed past the bewildered 3, taking the stairs 2 at a time. She never thought of it as trespassing. She knew her golden curls were her passport to the world. She never doubted her right to be anywhere, do anything, every door unlocked. So those are just a few from, so To Revere Place is the address of our first house, of the first house my parents bought in the United States. But for me, To Revere Place reminds me to revere the place that I came from. So it's great when things work out. The Litany of Missing came out of my grief for a friend who was taken quite suddenly and violently. And I actually started writing poetry in a serious way after his passing. I didn't realize I was writing a book about my friend Alex Dueñas until I realized I had a whole pile of poems about loss and about him and about our friendship and what an amazing person he was. So I'm going to start with the first poem from the book, which is the prologue. It's called Sundress. I try it on every few months, the ghost haunting the back of the closet where I hide things too precious to give away. I slip polka dots over my head, transform into a younger self. The sweep of fabric across my thighs reminds me of that night in Santiago, walking downtown on the way to dinner. We paused over a steam grate in the sidewalk, sudden updraft blowing the skirt skyward. Me, an abrupt tulip, my bare legs rooting me to the concrete. The 2-second eternity. How our eyes met across the few feet of pavement that separated me from you. We breathed in deeply before we dissolved into hysterical giggles, your laugh echoing off a canyon of skyscrapers. In an instant, I knew we would grow old together. Someday we'd laugh about you hurting me, sheepdog style, over more grates, trying to provoke another Marilyn in the 7-year itch moment. I knew I would see your face across the table for countless meals. Knew we would last forever. But sometimes the story turns out differently than we think. This is Inherit the Clock. When you die, leave me your watch, though it won't fit my wrist, a heavy metal case, an anchor to my unbound. Leave me a clasp to fasten an exploded body back together, a latch to keep my insides from spilling on the floor. Leave clock hands to sweep me into a future alone. Leave me a dial to wind a life you left unspooled. Leave me 12 numbers to count down what's left, meter the days I drag myself from bed to sink to coffee pot. Leave me the ticking to replace your heart, a metronome to retrain my own to beat again. So the one thing I learned, 2 things I learned about grief is that grief is not linear. And love is never lost. It just turns into something else. So that was from the Litany of Missing. It's not all sad. It was a good way for me to look at grief with compassion and somewhat with objectivity and to move through life. I don't think you get over things, you get through them. So writing this book helped me get through, but it'll stay with me. Since we first made contact, Harry, I had another book published quite suddenly. It's called Bedside Manners, and it is about my strange relationship with the American healthcare system, among other things. So I'm just going to read one poem from this. Patient Room Northwest 4418, Tower 2. It was about the size of a macadamia nut, she tells me, holding her thumb and index finger just over a centimeter apart. Dr. Jiang said it was the biggest he has ever removed. Groping in a Norco haze, I wonder if I should feel reflected pride on behalf of my surgeon. In a chirpy voice, the physician's assistant briefs me on the highlights of my procedure. She especially relishes the description of me prone on a gurney, my back flayed open. I am cast as a dark medieval saint, the offending grain unceremoniously excised. I think about this knot of agony dissected from myself, wonder where it rests in the bowels of St. Jude's. I imagine the pathologist peering into her microscope, scrutinizing this piece of me. Will she find a miracle in discarded flesh, encase me in glass, cloister me in the hospital reliquary? In this temple to the saint of hopeless cases, will this sliver reveal some long-hidden magic too powerful to be contained in frailty of bone? Has this laying on of surgically gloved hands revealed the charlatan at a tent revival? Chicken guts palmed, a swindler's leisure domain? So if you're going to have back surgery, hope that it's a planned one and not an emergency one. But that's just a little taste from Bedside Manners. I've grown up close to the healthcare system because I was raised by two physicians. And then as of late, I've intersected with healthcare in less nostalgic ways. I have a couple of poems that are newer or that are outside of the book. I don't write love poems as a general rule, but I also think that all poems are love poems because to put something down on paper takes some modicum of love. You ask if I love you, but sweet nothings lose value with years. Why waste mooning and spooning when there are plates to wash? Wedding china drip drying, teacups sighing on the dish rack. With inflation, even 50-cent words are worth less, so why spend breath when there are lavender-scented stacks of boxer shorts, neatly folded, in thirds, and tucked in a dresser drawer? Replace paper valentines with spaghetti carbonara. Fill my mouth with a drip of bacon fat, redolent with devotion. I crave field greens undressed in virginal olive oil. Woo me with garbage cans, wheels flush with the curb, and I'll win you with junk mail shredded to confetti. Sweep me off my feet with clean floors, and I'll seal the electric bill with a kiss. When you and I fade to whispers, we will reminisce about a life loved daily. The ice trays filled, extra cakes of soap balanced in the dish, TV remote drowsing on the sofa. Why say I love you when there are fresh sheets on the bed, the smooth of pillowcases cool against your cheek, down pillows fluffed to cradle the curve of your dreaming head? And because of the intersection of film and all things I love, I have a couple of poems that reference my love of the movies. Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday is the Sunday before Easter Sunday. I know this because every year on Palm Sunday weekend, ABC screens the Ten Commandments. I grew up Buddhist, ever the odd child out during the high holy days and Semana Santa. But every year I connect to the great American superculture through Cecil B. DeMille. Everything I know about American masculinity I learned from Charlton Heston's Moses. Yul Brynner, a sexy pharaoh. So let it be written, so let it be done. Around the time of the plague of locusts, my eyes drift to a framed photo on top of the TV. Jeff and I caught mid-laugh, biting opposite sides of an enormous peach. Backlit against blue sky, we eat the sun. And then for my last poem, I actually wrote the first draft of this during the pandemic when we were all cloistered in our homes, but it seems relevant again during the strike. So this is Take Me to Church. Take me to church. Let me pass through glass doors I have not entered in a year. Altar boys intone, child, adult, or senior. Accept my tithe, dispense my dispensation. I've missed black-vested ushers who direct me to the right chapel radiating off the lobby. I crave the taste of buttery host. I wait in line to purchase a value-sized Coca-Cola, a concession stand sacrament. I yearn for footsteps muffled by industrial carpet. I press my palm to the swinging chapel door and am swept into a dimmed sanctuary. I murmur, "Excuse me," when I brush past families and single congregants, grope for an empty seat place in the pew. I feel for the press of worn velvet upholstery, prepare for the liturgy. The sermon begins with a commandment to silence our cell phones. Our pupils contract with the coming flash of light, ears ring with THX. Here in the dark, we are alone together, lost in the rapture of stories. I mouth a silent hallelujah for celluloid parables that sustain us through the working week. Affirm our faith in happy endings.
Thank you, Aruni, for such a lovely reading. You took us to church, you took us to movies, you took us into your heart. You know, your poetry has such a dealing with an endurance of the heart, if you will, when you deal with grief and also what you've gone through and your loss of a friend and your love of Barbie doll and Judy Blume and American movies. And I associate especially with the movies part. I know you said that you began writing when a friend of yours, I assume, died. I think that's what you said. How old were you when you wrote your first poem?
My very first poem? I mean, I was always scribbling something. My grandmother, who was like our third parent, she lived with us when we were growing up, was an English teacher. So my summers were not, turned loose and run around. I had homework assignments and creative writing assignments. So she dreamt me a poet long before I dreamt it for myself. So I started writing when I was really young, but I didn't really start writing in earnest until 2017, when my friend was murdered. And I was just devastated, and I had no way to process what was happening. And a dear friend of mine, who at the time was just an acquaintance, urged me to write something as a way to process my grief. So I wrote a long prose poem about our friendship. And that was called "Walking in Santiago After Midnight." And I read it at a reading series in LA that's very dear to my heart, the Rorschach reading series. And someone heard it that day at the series and offered to publish it. And I just thought, what are you talking about? Because I was just going to write the one poem and that was it. I had no intention of reading it, let alone having it in print. And then poetry ate my life. And now I'm 4 books in and working on more.
Isn't that interesting? When lost, then you make an ascent out of the descent, and how you write a poem, and the poem gets into the grief, gets into the musicality and the rhythms of the poem, and it helps somehow. And then the craft and the form that you create helps you transcend it, even though you still have the loss in your heart. It helps. Where did you grow up?
I was born in New York City. And then I was born in the Bronx at Bronx Lebanon Hospital. And then we moved to Rockland County from there. And then when I was almost 10, we moved to California. And I actually live in the house I grew up in Orange County. So, but I consider myself a New Yorker. I think being an American is one citizenship and being a New Yorker is a different one. So my country of origin is New York.
What is it about the poetry form that attracts you to it?
The ability to create a whole universe with very few words. I like the to be stringent about language. Left to my own devices, I'm very purple prosy, and I use a lot of adjectives and adverbs. And when I started writing poetry, I really got a better sense of the power of language and how a single word can evoke a whole lifetime for someone. And people usually, the general public balks at poetry and they think they don't get it. And I think if you can give someone a poem that they can carry around and think about, like carry around like a penny in your pocket, it makes it less scary, makes language more accessible to people.
You have such clarity in your writing. When you sit down to write a poem today or yesterday, what do you focus on? Do you focus on an idea, an image, words come to you? What is it that you begin a poem with?
It depends on the poem. I love words. I'm in love with words. There are words in other languages that have no equal translation. So sometimes I'll just think about a word and think how I can create a small life around that word. Or sometimes, like I took a road trip to Arizona, and as I was driving through the desert, I saw palm trees that had no heads. They were just the trunks. And I pulled over to the side of the highway and grabbed a piece of paper and wrote decapitated palm trees and stuck it in my pocket. And it showed up later in the poem. Or I go walking with a dear friend of mine who's another poet. She lives on my street. And we see Western bluebirds in the park. And we'll look at each other and think like, oh, that's a poem. And I'll just put that in my pocket and bring it back later. Or sometimes they just write themselves.
That's beautiful. Who are some of the poets in the past, before you began writing, that you read that you may have been influenced by them?
Dylan Thomas. I was an English lit major at college at UCLA. So Dylan Thomas for sure. Bob Dylan. A lot of singer-songwriters. And then I'm influenced by a lot of contemporary people who I know in real life who have such a way with words. Brendan Constantine, for sure. My fellow poets at Moontide Press, my fellow poets at Arroyo Seco, at Picture Show. I'd love to go to readings and hear what other people have to say. My workshop mates, I'm influenced a lot by other people who I know. I'm so lucky to live in LA, and there's such a vibrant poetry community, and there's so much to learn from other people. So I've been lucky. I've been lucky to have been nurtured by some really wonderful people when I first started. I'm a newbie. I'm still very new to this whole scene.
When you were talking about the movies, what are your top 10 movies of all time?
I had a list. I had a list somewhere on my Facebook. I love Cinema Paradiso. I love movies about the movie. So Singing in the Rain, I love. So there's so many. Silence of the Lambs. I could watch that movie once a month. It's so dark, but it's such a window into the human psyche. And I understand you're in it. You play Mr. Bimble. Yep. So, but it's such a fantastic film. I'm trying to think what I've seen recently. It's overwhelming right now. There's such a wealth of content. But I tend to watch the same things over and over again. A movie I think is brilliant that not very many people recognize brilliance is A Trip to Bountiful. Such a beautiful story. It unfolds so slowly. I like slow moving films. I love Lost in Translation. Just like The City of Tokyo is another character. It's just brilliant. Trying to watch more movies made by women. My husband has his MFA in screenwriting, so I've been influenced a lot by his coursework. I love films of Mira Nair. It's just incredible to see a South Asian woman put our experience up on the screen and let me think objectively about my life story. So yeah, so many different directors, so many different actors. And it filters down into the language of poetry. It filters down into, what I wrap my psyche around and what I want to write about. I love the 10 Commandments. It's like my ritual. I'm Buddhist, but every year I bought myself a copy. I sit down and watch the 10 Commandments, and it says so much about being an American. Just incredible. Yeah. So many things.
I remember one time there was a cafe in Hollywood that a bunch of us used to hang out, and all of a sudden this one guy yelled out, just out of the blue, he said, "There's no way that what was around the world in 80 days is better than the 10 Commandments." I think the first Around the World in 80 Days beat the 10 Commandments for the best film. I don't know what year, maybe 1955, but I always love those biblical stories too. King of Kings by Cecil D. DeMille, 1921, with the organ player. But I'm glad you love movies. I love movies too. And obviously, Motion Picture Home is a place for people who worked in the movies in front of or behind the camera and are retired. So, we're blessed by your appearance here today. And I just have a wonderful feeling about, your sense of love and warmth. And also you're dealing with grief and loss, and you deal with those in such a, kind way and with such clarity. So thank you very much, Aruni, for your wonderful reading.
Thank you for your kind words. Grief is something that we all share. And, if I can connect to someone over it and make that person feel less alone in the experience of loss, that's a win.
Well, you touched me very deeply. So thank you once again, Aruni.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Our next poet is Robert Krut. Robert Krut is the author of 4 books: Watch Me Trick Ghosts, Cod Hill SUNY Press, 2021. The Now Dark Sky, Setting Us All on Fire, Cod Hill SUNY Press, 2019, winner of the Cod Hill Poetry Award. This Is the Ocean, Bonafide Books, 2013, and The Spider Sermons, Blaze Box, 2009. His poems have appeared in numerous journals, both in print and online. He teaches at the University of California, Santa Barbara, in the writing program and College of Creative Studies, and lives in Los Angeles. Here's a splendid poet, Robert Krut.
Thank you so much, Harry. And, thank you so much for having me. My friend Jerry Garcia turned me on to your series a little while back, and it's been so nice to see it flourish and continue. And I love doing anything connected to the MPTF, living in Los Angeles. There's no way that film and TV doesn't influence all of us. So I loved hearing that conversation with Aruni just now. And it was wonderful to hear your wonderful poems, Aruni, as well. And I saw that the series started in March of 2020. So I decided I'm going to read kind of in reverse chronological order, because my most recent book, which is this one, Watch Me Trick Ghosts, I started writing in March of 2020. So in keeping with the series here, I thought I would start with poems from this book. And this is the first from that collection, The Dinner Party. All the conversations tonight are about wounds. What a kind nicety to be tired of talking about wounds. The wine glasses each have a fingertip in their bowl. The wounds are described at length. Looking for an exit, only entrances. Looking for an entrance, only a wound. You learned how to give stitches when you were just 13 to yourself, lost in the woods on a camping trip. The teacher found you, poured alcohol on the suturing. Raise a toast to memory, raise a glass of fingers. The table is a boat on an ocean of sighs and then laughter. Some of the wounds look like a mouth. The entrance is a window, the window is a ladder. The host leads a prayer to our wounds. Everyone is served a plate of teeth. The laughter is a blade held in your side for safekeeping. Stand up, and share your wounds, or leave the party with a tourniquet and a missing limb. smoothing stone. In the river, it is always night. Lay flat, breathed by drowning. Under the water, you can't see the land on fire. Become the river's lung. Don't say a prayer, become a prayer. Lower yourself without help. There's no gravity inside the river. Each pebble is another moon. There is moss, there is a blanket for rest. The river is dark and the river is cold. Each pebble beneath you cools the hillside heat. Understand this bed levitates. A water snake curls across your torso. You are an animal, a creature who inhales water. Your fingers are 10 parades of pebbles. Drown your hands under the water and silt. The fire is without gravity. It is hair and wind. It inhales you, it exhales you. Stay still and drink the water with your lungs. Smoke is reflected on the river. Smoke reflects the river. It is always night in the river. It pulls you to its mouth, the moon's mouth. A pebble in your pocket, your skull smoothed by water. You are stone and you are current. Tourniquet Road. We returned from the road when the road turned bone and the gas stations all rib cages. You are a heart, which is different from saying you are my heart or you have my heart. It is saying that you are a heart. The sound of street lamps throb when we speak under the city's drum beats. You can whisper, I can hear. I'll lower my voice until merely impersonating speech and your lips, soft Morse code. Everyone is watching. No one is watching. When this is all over and the building's boarded up, I'll be here watching for you after an embrace as windows smash themselves out, their shards on the road leading the way like a vein to a wound. The anxious lever of lowering sky. Fear is a blade held in a lung. The sky lowers an inch each night. Play pin finger till dawn, you have 10. Keep sticking your thumb in a socket, electrical or eye, it's all the same. You walk through the room like an aspirin. Sleep is pointless when day is night. A lump of ground rises to make your sofa. When you breathe, you create the clouds. The clouds are a loose brain of lightning. That is not something to celebrate. You did all of this and nothing. Take credit or don't. Eat praise like porridge. Drink anger like poison. Both leave you full, exhaling sky. A knock at the door, but the moon covers your mouth like a mask. I loved hearing Aruni talk about Judy Blume, because I grew up in New Jersey, and Judy Blume was from the town next to where I grew up. So she was as much of a literary celebrity as like Allen Ginsberg in my hometown. And I remember getting her books as a kid, and my 8th birthday, my parents got me Super Fudge, which I read cover to cover in about 1 or 2 days. I loved it so much. So it was really fun to kind of reminisce hearing that poem. And in each of my books, I have one poem that takes place in New Jersey. I wasn't going to read this one, but hearing Aruni mention Judy Blume, I thought I might read this one. And then strangely, as Harry mentioned, I teach at the University of California, Santa Barbara. That's where I am right now in my office, which doesn't usually have this blue sheet behind me. And someone is smoking outside in the courtyard, and it's wafting into my office. I've never seen anyone smoke on this campus in 20 years of teaching here. So it's very strange, and it seems like it's a sign that I should read this poem about going back to your hometown and smoking outside of the bar that all of the high school alumni hang out at now, which is Jukebox Eddie's on Route 22 in North Plainfield, New Jersey. There you go. So this is called a bar called Nostalgia on Route 22. Your hometown, like a photo negative on top of a photo negative. Standing outside the bar in the parking lot of a strip mall, light a cigarette. Imagine it will taste like pine and winter air, and instead, it just tastes like a cigarette. Two old high school friends make out furiously against the alley's back wall while their respective families sleep at home to the light of bedside laptops. There is the temptation to treat this whole town like a grave, and the one woman dancing to a local cover band inside its angel. And that might make you tough. Imagine you are steel through brick, but you are here, of course, pulled by the gravity and habit of history. The cigarette isn't done, and it wasn't even good. The tree across the state road is a cell phone tower disguised as an evergreen. Everyone is back inside, and the bass, a muffled heartbeat through the walls. Your hometown, a secret tattooed on your back, never to be seen as you walk forward, each step based on what you think it says and what you know it doesn't. I alluded to this being written in the spring of 2020, and like a lot of people at that time, there wasn't much to do, and we would just walk around our neighborhood a lot. And a lot of times, you would notice at night one or two other people kind of out, and everyone hesitant to get near each other, and stores that had been closed for a few weeks. And I guess this was my way of trying to write about that experience. Accidental light. I'm walking after midnight. I'm walking before sunrise, investigating sirens heard echoing off the bones and the walls before I walked out the door. The only light comes from the convenience store in the corner that closed weeks ago, their electricity still on, the lottery sign glowing against the glass that makes the parking lot swell. I'm walking alongside shadows of no one, walking under the dome curve of a pupil, scanning for sound, but only finding a possum fighting a raccoon behind an RV. In the parking lot of the church with a sign lit that just says, soon, a single sound calls out, a car doing donuts, its headlights off, the tires occasionally screaming against the pavement while it keeps circling. I'm walking long after midnight. The scars of the world are turning neon. I'm walking before sunrise, knocking on a stranger's door and running. Just a few more. This is the book that came out before that one. This is The Now Dark Sky, Setting Us All on Fire. I'll read a couple of these. Divinity. Virus blind, you stumble to an alley. Under a lentil rainstorm, a preacher waves rudder arms to thunder, makes lightning scatter until 5 canaries escape his sleeves, singing condolences, a misdirection from the transistor radio around his neck. Beneath his vestments, its zealous torque fusing electrodes to your breath, turning thoughts to words, your face a cannon, and the realization he was merely a collection of discarded nightclub flyers lifted by wind between graffitied walls. Neighborly gestures. Pollution in the hardware, there's no escaping. The low-hanging clouds spell your name in wet cotton cursive and fill themselves with sludge, with oil, with a mass of slurry just waiting to release. And here we rush from storefront to storefront, trying to open a door, but no help arrives. In one, an old man locks his palms to the handle and sways back to block us out until we are on the street, open, naked, unprepared for what is coming our way, this pension of suffering that is inevitable, but also so easily remedied as that man disappears behind the blur of his own breath, masking the glass. Repeat and again repeat together. Each moment of the day drops straight from the sky as a sliver, dropping in a vertical line, lodging itself into our skin, revealing the pure darkness that hid behind the blue and cloudy mural above, to leave thin, translucent spikes sticking out from our arms, our legs. And as the curtain above turns to black with the absence of time, we lie here, backs on grass, dew climbing up and over our thighs. If I remove your needles, will you remove mine? Take your time. We will pull each out, breathe on the spots left behind, and put them in a satchel. We will carry that bag every day, and every day gather up more, and every day wind up in darkness again. thought I'd read two new ones here quickly, particularly because I know it's a cliche for people to write about the moon, but I lean into it as much as I can, it seems. And after the blue moon, the other night that we all watched and posted a million pictures to social media about, I realized that maybe this new one might be worth reading. Lunar Bargaining. The moon is magnet to bone, arm raised to wave goodbye or hail a cab's yellow blur. The moon is magnet to bone, pulling night, implying a choice, but all along, predestined to love the flickering street lamps, the slow reveal of a pockmarked circle in the sky. That circle we will write another prayer to, even as someone stands before us, about to leave, begging for a sonnet. Cloud as gravity. A cube in your chest, a heart in your hands. A void in the muscles, numb wiring, nowhere to run while animals prowl the edge of the street. Look up, a cloud shaped just like you, your puzzle piece entryway, waiting to reunite, the attempt to complete a canvas, ultimately its undoing. Tether yourself to land, hold the hand of the person closest to you, even a stranger. Gravity won't save you when alone, a choice to be made. The houses have hoof and ground. These horses eat the hearts left behind. And I realized that this is exactly 10 years ago. My second book came out this season, last fall, and that's this one. This is The Ocean. And to wrap up, I thought I would just read one of these from that. Hold me, the walls are falling. Like the busted jaw of a lion, downtown lays open wide, its teeth jagged from trying to eat the stars. We hold each other when the earth shudders, keep our heads down when the windows fall like loose scabs. In that embrace, our breath mingles, and we're in a typhoon, hidden from a crowd, looking up, their mouths agape. The sky crusts over into the insides of a geode, winking itself onto the walls, refracting darkness into glitter. Hold me, because when we look up, this will all be gone, and my eyes will be moon, yours, sun. Thanks so much. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Aruni.
Thank you, Robert. You just such an astonishing poetry you have. You're so amazing. You deal with reality, and yet then you have transformations where you go into your imagination, and you just have a new way of putting sentences together and similes and metaphors, and it's just so transfixing. What do you, when you sit down to write a poem, and what do you focus on? And then just tell us a little bit about how you may move through a poem, because it just really is. It's new and then it's revelatory, and yet it's real. The imagination that you employ becomes real, almost not the same way, but like on a Wallace Stevens level, where things are always in constant, and it's meditative and it's thrilling. How do you just take us through one of your poems or something that you would like us to know, to let us know a little bit more about your way of working?
Sure, thank you, and thank you for those words. I feel like I want to quote it and put it on a shirt to wear around. Thank you. Well, it was interesting. I think there's two ways that it happens, and one way was very similar to what Aruni was mentioning, which I found interesting, where you're just out and something catches your eye and you just jot a phrase down or an image down, and then you revisit it later. And that's one way. And I would say half of the poems work out like that, where a lot in the most recent book, I had mentioned kind of just walking around the neighborhood, and there was a lot of that during the writing of that, where you just notice someone else standing behind the street lamp, or a store that's been closed for weeks, but the light is still on inside. And so that's one way. But the other way, a lot of times, is just sitting down and trying to not think at all, and just whatever comes out, comes out. And that means there's a lot of junk that comes out, and it has to be kind of trimmed and hedged. But it also means that you're not restricting your imagination at all. And sometimes that will veer into things you've done before or images other people have had. But then when you trim it all away, hopefully something will reveal itself that's fresh and that you want to explore a little bit more.
Well, whatever you do it great. When did you write your first poem?
I've always loved writing. When I was really young, I mean, like second, third grade, like a lot of kids, I discovered Shel Silverstein around the same time as Judy Blume, and I wrote a million little rhyming poems. And wonderfully, my mom and a friend's mom typed them up for us, and we made a little book of all these poems, which was so a long time ago. But then in high school, discovering the beats, really, I really started to ease into writing. Once I discovered Bob Dylan, which Aruni mentioned, that led me to discovering Allen Ginsberg, and then everything opened up from there. So high school, really, by the end of high school, I was writing a lot.
Yeah, Allen Ginsberg gave me a sense of freedom too.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
Grew up in New Jersey, about 45 minutes outside of New York, a little town, North Plainfield. My dad worked in Newark for his career, so we were based right in there.
Jennifer's here. She's a New Jersey woman. So what do you say, Jennifer?
Yeah, my dad worked in Somerville.
Oh, that was right by where I grew up.
Yep. And I grew up in Phillipsburg.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know where Phillipsburg is?
Vaguely. It sounds familiar. Where exactly is it?
So if you continue on 22 west,
very
last town in New Jersey before you cross into Easton to get to Allentown.
I know exactly where that is.
Right on the Delaware River.
Yes. Okay. I know exactly where that is.
Yep.
And Somerville we talk about movies and TV. We used to go to the movies when I was little. To Somerville Circle had movie theater. The first movie I saw as a kid, the first Star Wars movie, in the theater, the Somerville Circle Theater there. So I have very warm movie memories of Somerville.
So little inside baseball guy, sorry about this. Our school system, our athletic league was part of the East Penn League. So we would do all of our travel games in Pennsylvania. So I don't really know a whole lot about New Jersey because we didn't travel. Like I had two brothers that were very big in sports, and anything about Eastern Pennsylvania, I can tell you. New Jersey, I'm like, my dad brought home good baked goods from Somerville. That's
sure. Oh, the Italian bakeries. Come on. Yeah.
So good. The rest of New Jersey was just on my path to get to New York City.
Yeah, I think that's what, for most people, that's what it is. Yeah, exactly. I have a lot of very vivid and good memories of it, but it pops up in the poems a lot. That's like the joke, is that you leave New Jersey, but it never leaves your writing if you grew up there. So it always pops back in.
Right. It's in your heart.
Yes.
I have nothing but love for New Jersey. I remember a movie I saw recently that's about New Jersey. Have you seen Patterson?
I'm embarrassed to admit, because I love Jim Jarmusch, love Adam Driver, and obviously I love poems, and I still have not seen that movie.
Oh, life-changing movie.
Okay. Well, now I know what I'm doing tonight. That's perfect.
You must watch it. It's amazing.
I'm making a note too, Patterson.
Also, you have William Carlos Williams Patterson and Allen Ginsberg Patterson. And I asked Rooney this question, Robert. What is it about the poetry form that attracts you to it?
Well, I'll start by actually referencing something Aruni said earlier, which is I love the idea of trying to evoke image in as few words as possible. Like, how much can you express, trimming the language back and picking the most dense, powerful language? I love that about it. And I love the idea of trying to express an idea through image and through moments, as opposed to, when I was young, I wanted to write fiction as well, but it's not the way my mind works, I realized, which is a traditional narrative. And I like the idea of trying to evoke a larger story through these brief moments of a poem as we move along. So that's kind of what I find to be the most appealing aspect of it for me.
What would each one of you like to say about the other's poetry? Why don't you start with Aruni and say a few words about Robert's poetry, and then Robert about Aruni, if you would, please.
You have quite a way with building a world that's underpinned with so much brooding, emotional, like there's like the storm underneath your words. The repetition of wound, I was like, oh, I can feel this poem so deep in my marrow. It's just powerful, and there's a restraint that you just feel like if you weren't restraining yourself, it would just the words would just mow your reader down. Like I love the restraint because you can feel the power behind it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it is. I love writing that it's as full as the water balloon can get without bursting. Like that's kind of I like how I you say that. Thank you. And and Harry, I'm so glad you asked us this, because I'm sitting here in the office listening to these poems, and really we're just meeting now. But I loved the poems, and then what you said about writing about grief and the idea that other people can connect with it, and obviously these poems are coming from a very specific place to your life, but for me, listening to it and feeling the emotion from those poems, they become universal, and I had such a strong personal reaction to what you were reading about through those poems, and I just found that to be particularly meaningful, just in terms of the poems themselves, but about poetry in general, and how we can all connect with each other, whether we know each other, whether we know each other's circumstances, whether we know the inspiration for those poems. It really, sitting here in this very strange computerized world that we're in, for it to kind of hit you like that is really meaningful. And I'm so glad that I got to hear them read out loud.
Thank you. Like, what do they say, that we read so we feel less alone? So that's sort of in the back of my mind when I write something. Like, you're supposed to write for someone, someone in mind. And sometimes I am thinking about a particular friend or someone I saw on the street, and I think like, oh, I would love to reach X person and make them feel less alone.
Robert, what would you say to a young woman who's beginning to write poetry and she sits down to write her first poem? What would you tell her to focus on? Not to worry about what anyone's going to say about it, to just start and just let it come out, and don't worry about who's going to read it. Is it going to be published? Are people going to laugh at me? Has someone else done this before? Just start. That would be the advice. How about you, Aruni? What would you tell a young woman?
Don't let your preconceptions of what a poem's supposed to look like hold you back. Like, there are no poetry police. No one's going to come knocking on your door and say that's not a poem. I have a great friend named David Rockland, and he told me in the very beginning, write what you're afraid what you're most afraid to write about. You should write about that.
Isn't there a line by Jung, something like, you meet your destiny on the road you chose not to travel on, or, whatever it is, things unexpectedly come along, right? And, you two just bring so much warmth and knowledge to this poetry hour. I don't know about you, but sometimes, like, for example, today I wasn't really feeling as good as I would have liked. And then I start the poetry show, and your poetry, both of yours, just lifts me up. And there's a sense of exaltation and clarity. Do you go through, I assume we all go through different things, but you both have such eloquence in your writing in different ways. How do you feel about that? Does it affect you too?
Do you want to explain?
Are you just pretty steady, or all of a sudden you get connected to poetry, you're reading or you're writing, and listening? It just changes my life. Both of you have. It's not too specific of a question, but you know what I'm trying to say.
I think For the longest time, I would say I don't like to write, but I like to have written, where you can like hold up a piece of paper and say, "Oh, this came out of my brain." But I'm slowly getting to the point where I actually like the process, and and like to see things taking shape. And I do well with deadlines, but I've been more disciplined now. I try to write every day, or revise, or read somebody else's poems, because I think the least that we owe each other are words. Like when I wrote my book about my friend who died, and people asked, what motivated me, I thought, he was like one of the great loves of my life. He was an amazing friend, and the least I owe him are my words. And that's kind of what propels me when I just feel like, oh God, do I have to open up a laptop today and be productive? But that's the least we owe each other, I think, as human beings.
Robert?
That's such a beautiful way of putting it. I was just going to say, like, if I don't write for a while, I get headaches and I get very irritable. And you put it in this very, I realize sometimes if I'm in a funk, or if I'm irritated a lot, I'll think, you didn't make time for writing for a couple of days. That's why. Or you haven't picked up a book or in a couple of days because you've been off doing this or that or whatever. And it starts to affect just your demeanor and your psychological well-being. So trying to keep that constant moving, it's just kind of a baseline of peace when you're working on it. But Aruni, the way you put it was lovely. So I'll go with that.
I'd like to think I was that virtuous. There are some days where it's all I can do to write a grocery list. So.
Yes, indeed.
Well, that could be a William Carlos Williams influence poem too, right? He would write those down. You've both just given us such a marvelous reading, both of you. You touched me deeply, and your clarity and eloquence is just off the charts. So thank you, Robert Krut, and also thank you, Aruni Wijesinghe. And here's our wonderful director, Jennifer Clymer.
Very special hour. Thank you. As I predicted, I called it. Before we go, I want to ask Harry what's in line for next week.
Next Tuesday, we have two wonderful poets, Iris Berry and Lucia Galloway. That should be a wonderful reading. It will be a wonderful reading.
Yes, thank you both so much. Join us whenever you want. Please come back. And we're about a week and a half away from a very special day where Beyond Baroque is going to honor Harry. So I encourage all of you, the 16th of September, it's going to be virtual. So get your virtual tickets now. Tickets are free, and it will be an afternoon honoring Harry. And we're all very excited about it.
Thank you very much.